Welcome back to the election special, local elections in Wales 2022. And we've had, it's been slow. A large number of councils have declared, and there have been obviously, some shockers really. A lot of council leaders have lost their seats. For one, in Carmarthenshire, Emlyn Dole, the former leader, went. In Caerphilly, the leader there went. Labour have done reasonably well. Lib Dems have done well. Conservatives seem to be going slightly backwards. The Independents, well, they're there somewhere or other. Gwyn Oro, just give us a brief overview of what you've been observing today across the party lines.
Well, we did an earlier podcast on what were the prospects and what areas to look at. And it's gone pretty much according to expectations that Labour would do quite well, as you just said. They've regained one or two of their target areas, notably Blaenau Gwent, and I'm sure they're going to do well in Cardiff. Monmouthshire and the Vale of Glamorgan yet to declare, but they are apparently on a knife edge. Well, if that's the case, it means Labour is going to do well there as well. Now, one funny thing is, what's happened in Carmarthenshire? It came a very close call in certain seats between Plaid Cymru and Labour. In Carmarthen, 2 or 3 of the Plaid Cymru councillors hang on by about 10, 15, 100. As you said, their leader lost. And yet what is surprising to read was that Adam Price said that Labour had made no impact. Well, for Plaid to have lost the leader of the council, I reckon that's quite a big impact. Lib Dems have done very well in Powys. That is their heartland, of course. If they don't do well in Powys, they want to do well anywhere. But doing well there, which is very good for the party, the best for 10 years and more, explains their problem. It is a party for mid-Wales, increasingly, and has been for far too long, and not seen as a party for Wales. And that is their challenge. That is their problem. Is it a mid-Wales party, or is it an all-Wales party? The Tories have lost far more than we realise. I think they've lost influence in Anglesey, where I believe Plaid Cymru are now the largest party. The Tories have lost out there. They're lost in Denbigh. They're losing in Monmouth. They're lost in Swansea something. Cardiff, I'm sure they're going to lose a lot. It's pretty much as we expected. It's a tide is with Labour. It might not be as great as we all imagine it's going to be, but the tide is certainly flowing that way at the moment.
Adam Price, as you said, there's no impact in Carmarthenshire. Di Jenkins, one of the main leading figures in Plaid Cymru. Emlyn Dole, another big figure. Jeanette Gillespie and Kid Whaley losing out to 2 young Labour candidates, relatively unknown. And people are making the comments online in Buryport. 2 Labour, relatively unknown. Some of these Labour candidates new, a renewed Labour, Welsh Labour in Carmarthenshire specifically, where the leader really has gambled on putting in people he's just gathered together, ousting some of the long-serving Labour members of the Labour Party. Has the gamble paid off?
The gamble of having...
Well, just refreshing the Welsh Labour Party in Carmarthenshire.
Well, it has in many, many ways. And also, they've just missed out, haven't they? If I was a Labour leader in Carmarthen, I would be sitting down tonight and saying how close we came to doing that much better and making a bigger impact than people realise.
As you say, putting 3 candidates in Carmarthen North and South really was a mistake. If he'd put 2 in there, then the chances are that at least one of them would have got elected.
That's always been a debate. In a 3-seat ward or a 2-seat ward, do you just have one person so that the voters can concentrate on him or her, or do you go for the whole lot? That's always been a debate for decades. I remember that back in my day. I can't argue on that. Probably, if there'd only been 2, they would have won in Carmarthen, yes.
We talked earlier about the habits of voters, and some people are you talking about from working class voting Conservative. Do you think it is a personality thing? Do you think it's media led that leads some people to make the decision, or do you give them more credit than that and think they do analyse, they do their research, and they do really put that X for the person they believe is going to be representative of their community?
It's a conundrum, isn't it? I don't know how much analysis has been done of this. Is it the national scene or the Welsh scene, UK scene? What's going on at that level? Or is it the influence of the local member? My hunch is that what's happening on a Wales or an UK level is more predominant in the decision-making process than the local person. You just mentioned young new candidates winning, not known, and winning against experienced older people.
Yeah.
Now that lends me to say there must be other things in the boiling pot, as it were, that has made that happen. But well, I don't know. You can't answer that with definitive result. But I think it's a mixture of the two, but maybe with the national scene predominating over the local scene.
Do you think Mark Drakeford has played an extremely clever game here and manoeuvred and positioned the Welsh Labour Party in a very strong position under a nationalist, very Welsh agenda and identity, and thus pushing Plaid Cymru now and Adam Price to become very much just a sort of a nodding dog?
Well, I think a lot of things have come together at the right time. It's almost like a perfect storm, isn't it, in reality?
You predicted this. You predicted this 40, 50 years ago. You said this. Well, you said it.
I've always argued, you see, that the Labour Party in Wales should be the natural party of Wales. That's where I was in the 60s and the 70s. But sadly, in those days, there were a lot of people in the Labour Party in Wales who just would not have it. It wasn't even called the Welsh Labour Party. It wasn't even called that, okay? Now, life has changed, and I think it's changed from Rhodri Morgan gradually, then Carwyn Jones, and now under Mark Drakeford. But Mark has benefited from a tragedy, really, which is COVID. He has made an impact as being different to Boris Johnson and the way decisions were made in England. There's an identity thing now that Wales can be different, and that Wales, under a Welsh Labour Party, can be a different party to the English Labour Party.
Right. Well, because
of that, I think he's gathering more and more. But mind, on the other side of that, Boris Johnson, in my judgment, is making a mess of things. There's the cost of living crisis, there's energy crisis, there's all sorts of things now in the frying pan, which has come together, which has made Welsh Labour's position much easier to handle. And Plaid Cymru, in my judgment, have made, as I said earlier, the same mistake as the Liberal Democrats when they joined in with the Tories in 2010.
Right.
The independent voice of Plaid Cymru in the Senedd is no longer there.
Let's finish on this point now. I'll put this to you. Does Keir Hardie now have to almost replicate what Mark Drakeford has done and split up the Labour Party in England to the regions, more localised, the identity? North, we know it's a different culture. North of England, southwest of England, east of England. Should he follow that example and maybe put in very strong characters to lead that, much like a First Minister, but for those regions?
Well, do you know what you called him? Keir Hardie, I think.
Yeah.
Keir Starmer.
Oh, sorry. Oh, gosh.
He was named, by the way. Don't worry.
After Keir Hardie, that's right.
An easy mistake to make.
That's right.
Because he was named after Keir Hardie.
That's right.
You know, that's the interesting thing.
A Freudian slip.
That's right. But the point being, there is now a clear identified Welsh Labour Party. It is obvious under the new leader in Scotland that there is now a more identifiable Scottish Labour Party. And by the way, They've done very well in Scotland, the Labour Party, and they have now replaced the Tories in second place. So this separate identity is working. It's working in Wales, it's working in Scotland. In England, it's a different issue. There are regional parties existing, and they've also got mayors. You know what I mean? For instance, Andy Burnham is strong in Manchester, and there are others as well in the northeast and so on.
Yeah.
What Drakeford needs to understand is that the strength of Labour in Britain is to be diverse. The strength of Labour in Wales is that there's nothing wrong in having divisions within the overarching party. Nothing wrong at all. Make it a federal party.
Well,
that's what I would recommend to him.
Well,
make it a federal party.
Well, if you're listening, Mr. Drakeford, you know, I think you owe Gwynnoro Jones here a couple of quid for all his fantastic advice that he's given and led to this landslide victory that you've had, this popularity contest that you've won across Wales. Many thanks. It's been good, as always, talking with Gwynnoro Jones, looking at these results as they came in. A bit slow, I have to say, specifically... you know, the councillors declaring still a lot to go, and we'll announce those later on Wales News Online on the Facebook page. But many thanks, Gwynnoro, for your time and effort today.